Alright, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about the new Netflix Resident Evil show and why it wasn't made for fans of the games. So who's this show made for? Well, this show is made for the millions of fans that loved the Paul W.S. Anderson / Mila Jovovich movies. Now, we just had the WTRC, or the Welcome to Raccoon City movie, the Resident Evil reboot, released just a couple of months ago. And of course, it wasn't amazing, but at least it tried to be like the games. Now, of course, it was a rushed mess. There were other problems like I've detailed in my review, but at the end of the day, it did try to be like the games. You know, it's almost as if, someone came up to you and said, hey, I'm going to try to do a backflip, and they have a good jump, they have a good start, they're about to do the backflip, and all of a sudden they just face plant on the ground. That's kind of like what happened to Welcome to Raccoon City. And so it wasn't perfect by any means. Like I said, it was a huge rushed mess, but at least it tried to be like the games. And it did get bonus points in my review for at least trying to be like the games. So going back to the topic at hand with this show, am I excited for this show? Well, the answer to that is no, I'm not excited for this show. Am I going to watch it? Well, of course I'm going to watch it because, this is a Resident Evil channel. So yeah, here's the real question. Was I expecting this show to actually be like the games? Well, of course not. Now, if you've been a subscriber to this channel, I've done previous videos on this Netflix show, and we've known the plot even, I'm pretty sure the plot details for the show came out even before I made this channel, which was, I think this channel is only like a year old, or just like a year and like a month old. And so this was even before that. So I don't really understand why there's so many Resident Evil fans that are just kind of like in shock that this show is going to be so different, that it's not going to be like the games, when we've already known that, right? I mean, if you've kept along with Resident Evil news, this shouldn't be a surprise. But the other thing is that it's not trying to be like the games. It's never done that. Like I said, we've known that the plot for this show was always going to be its own thing, much like in the same way that the Paul W.S. Anderson / Mila Jovovich movies were. But as mentioned, this show isn't made for Resident Evil fans of the games, or Resident Evil fans in general. No, their target audience is for people that like those movies. And let's face it, at the end of the day, those movies made a ton of money internationally. So in other words, this Netflix show, it might end up being a decent zombie show. And I do want to emphasize zombie show, because we already know that it's not going to be a Resident Evil show. Now, I'm expecting a bunch of Easter eggs. They're probably going to chuck a bunch of Resident Evil references in the show. But like I said, this show has never tried to be like the games, and so this should not be a shock. Now, speaking of those Paul W.S. Anderson movies, personally, I think that they were fine. I never really hated them. Well, actually, no. I mean, the third one, I think it's called Extinction, and the last one, I think, is Final Chapter. Those ones I pretty much hate. Those are just awful movies, just in general. But the other ones, they were fine. They were okay zombie movies. But like I said, were they Resident Evil movies? No, I would not say that. There were zombie movies with Resident Evil references, but that's about it. Now, my only concern with all of this, with this show, is that, especially when you have shows or movies that try to stray from the source material, is that it breeds confusion. If you talk to the general public, and by general public I mean people that aren't Resident Evil fans, most of them, if you tell them, hey, do you know Resident Evil? Or I'm going to go watch this Resident Evil show, or have you heard of this new Netflix Resident Evil show? A lot of them aren't going to think of the games. Sadly, that's not the case. They're going to think of the Paul W.S. Anderson movies. And this has actually happened to me before, where I've actually talked to people about Resident Evil, and they're like, oh yeah, Resident Evil. They think of those movies. And the other thing is that they think that those movies are just like the games. So for most people, they just think that Resident Evil, like I said, most people that aren't fans of the games, they just think that Resident Evil is just another post-apocalyptic zombie type of a game or / movie, because like I said, a lot of people think that the movies are just like the games. But in reality, as RE fans, we know, the post-apocalyptic aspect has never been talked about, has never been mentioned in Resident Evil. If anything, Resident Evil has always been trying to prevent that kind of a thing. The Resident Evil games have always just been about outbreaks that occur around the world. That's as close as you're gonna get to a post-apocalyptic. This isn't The Last of Us, and so that's the only thing that really concerns me. The other thing that also concerns me is that, since a lot of people know those Paul W.S. Anderson movies, and recently they just released that Resident Evil reboot, the Welcome to Raccoon City, which was trying to be like the games, and like we've already mentioned, it didn't stick the landing. It definitely failed in that part. But like I said, I did give it credit. I did give it bonus points just for, I did give it points for effort. But and to me personally, that's the best Resident Evil movie, just solely because it's the only one that actually tried to be like the games. My concern is that this might be really confusing to the general public. Especially if they have watched Welcome to Raccoon City, they watched the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, and now they're going to watch this Resident Evil show, which again is going back to the same formula as the Paul W.S. Anderson movies, which is we're just going to do our own thing. And with the Resident Evil logo, and we're just going to throw some Resident Evil references. That must be really confusing just to the average consumer, just to the general public. And so, but I'm also curious to see if this show will actually be successful. And speaking about video game movies, I recently watched Uncharted, and I couldn't even finish that movie. That movie, I'm a huge Uncharted fan. I don't know if you guys could see, but I have a poster right there of the third game. But I'm a real fan of Uncharted. And when I watched that movie was like trying to do its own thing and then also try to incorporate the games, but it just failed on all fronts. Like personally, there were so many issues with that. As an action movie, it wasn't even passable. So and that movie apparently did really well at the box office. Now correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I saw some I was skimming through the news and I did see some articles that were like Uncharted, it does like $100 or whatever $1 million at the box office. I don't know if that's true. I haven't double checked that. But like I said, I'm pretty sure it did do really well, even though that movie I couldn't even finish it. It was really bad. And so going back to the topic, this show isn't made for fans of the games. This show was specifically made for the Resident Evil fans that like the Paul W.S. Anderson / Milla Jovovich movies. And you know what? That's fine. There's a bunch of people, like I said, those movies did do really well internationally. So there is a fan base, like it or not. I mean, those people are technically part of the Resident Evil fandom. They're just a really small part of the whole Resident Evil. Because a lot of RE fans will argue, well, no, they're not part of the Resident Evil fandom. But I mean, technically they kind of are. It's kind of like the Paul W.S. Anderson movie and Milla Jovovich movies are kind of like their own separate kind of like universe of Resident Evil. Anyways, we're not going to get into that. But at the end of the day, that is fine that they're making a show targeting that audience, since you do have to put yourself into the production company's shoes, right? Netflix executive shoes, and they're just trying to make a show that is successful, that keeps people coming back to the subscription, especially Netflix, right? Since this is a Netflix show, Netflix wants to make long-term shows that bring people back so that they can subscribe, so that Netflix can continue making money. These companies are trying to make money at the end of the day. That's all they're focused on. They're not focused on the Resident Evil fandom. And you know what? And that's one of the reasons why they hired people like, I think his name is Andrew Dabb, who is the creator of this Netflix show, who I think was also the creator and executive producer. Well, I think he's the writer and executive producer for this show and creator, but I think he was also the creator for the Supernatural show on the CW. Now, I've never watched that show. I've never been a huge fan of that. But what I do know of that show is that it lasted for like 8 seasons or more. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that show lasted for a long time. And so it doesn't surprise me that the production companies, they let this guy, Andrew Dabb, be, helm this project of making a Resident Evil show. And if it is successful and it does land, it does hit, land with audiences, then I wouldn't be surprised if the first season, if it's a decent zombie show, then they would probably already have plans for season 2, season 3, season 4. That is the sad truth of all of this, is that, they're just interested in making money, which is fine. Now, do I agree with this method? No, I don't agree. I think personally, if I was a production company or if I was an executive producer, I think more production companies should try to make video game movies like the source material, like the video games that they're trying to make a movie out of. To me, that just seems pretty clear. That's pretty obvious. But sadly, that's not happening. And you know what? It doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon. That's one of the reasons why when Welcome to Raccoon City came out, I was kind of like, you know what? Let's hold the hate, guys. Let's calm down, because what if this movie is good? I mean, this was before when it came out. What if it is good? Now, of course, like I did state, it didn't stick the landing, but I did give it points on the review, even though I thought the movie was okay. It was passable. I did give it bonus points in my review just because it was trying to be like the video game. And, if we think about it, how many video game movies or shows, whatever, have actually done a good job of telling the same story as the source material? There's not a lot. There isn't a lot, sadly. And so it does kind of suck as a Resident Evil fan that, again, they're doing their own thing, but it's not just the Resident Evil community, right? It's the video game community in general. Like I said, I just watched Uncharted and I couldn't even finish that movie. That's how bad it was. Yeah, that's the sad truth of all of this, is that these production companies are only interested in making money. And like I said, I do not agree with that. Again, this still has the potential to be a good zombie show, but is it going to be a Resident Evil show? No, it's not. And we shouldn't expect that. We shouldn't expect this show to be like Resident Evil show, because like I said, we've already known for months, for like a year or more, that this show was going to be its own thing. It was going to do the same kind of formula that the Milla Jovovich or Paul W.S. Anderson movies did. And just so you guys know, for those of you that are interested in this show or are willing to give it a chance, like I said, I'm still going to watch it since, it does have Resident Evil on the title. I'm actually going to be making a teaser trailer breakdown of that as well, so stay tuned for that. And the other thing that I also forgot to mention in my previous videos is that just like 2 weeks ago, I actually started opening channel memberships. So make sure to check the link down below if you guys want to see details on that. Also, don't forget to smack that like button. And if this is your first time here, we'll consider shooting that subscribe button in the face. Well, thank you so much everyone for watching my video, and I'll see you guys in the next one when you return to the world of Resident Evil.
The right to be a god. That right is now mine.